women are showing up to NHL games and like yelling "kiss" at the players, which I think is amazing. I love it. I love it. I'm a huge fan of it.
Welcome to Landline, the podcast where pop culture gets some context. I'm Mary Mahoney, your millennial friend with too many interests and not enough friends willing to talk on the phone. My guest today is Frankie Della Creta. Frankie is an independent sports journalist, writing at the intersection of sports, gender, and pop culture. They write the Out of Your League newsletter, which is one of my absolute favorites, and wrote a book called Hail Mary, which is about the first pro-women's football league in the United States. They've won National Journalism Awards, written magazine cover stories, written stories that helped change professional league policies, and uncovered hidden histories that have gone on to inspire TV shows. But I'll be candid, they're partly here because they're the kind of person that would figure out a way to get a funded trip to a Gaylor summer camp. I really love that they're passionate about sports coverage that doesn't center cis men, and for that reason, I knew they'd be the perfect person to discuss Heated Rivalry. Specifically, why is it straight women love it so much and love MLM romance, or men loving men? You know, I'm no different than everybody else. I've seen Heated Rivalry. It's on my brain all the time. I'm thinking a lot about why it's so popular, why it's so good. And it's really fun to have a conversation with someone who's thought deeply about it and has so many great things to say. What I didn't know was we were going to get into so much more. This episode is on the longer side and includes convos about the Olympics, Frankie's role in keeping the Olympics out of Boston, the PWHL and NHL, Lilith Fair, ? Gaylor, major ? And much more. I'm so excited to bring you this convo where I laughed genuinely so hard I cried and learned so much. Let's get into it. Okay, Frankie, I'm so excited to have you here. You were on my wish list. You feel like a big get to me. I'm obsessed with your writing. I'm obsessed with your work. So I'm just so delighted to have you here today.
That's so funny to me because I feel the same way about you. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm on Mary's podcast.
Oh my God, that's so sweet. I mean, let's let this love fest continue. But I feel like we have a lot of shared concerns. So obviously I'm obsessed with your newsletter. The way you write about sports with such a focus on gender and sexuality is so needed in our world. And we'll talk about, an event last night that's the opposite of your newsletter in many ways. But, I wanted to have you on primarily to talk about Heated Rivalry, which we will get into. But I just discovered some lore about you that we need to address. And not just that I met your dog named Regina George, who I'm now obsessed with. But, the Super Bowl was last night. And you did write a book about, let's be clear, women's football, not men's football. And, do you have any, did you watch the Super Bowl? Do you have any feelings about kind of what it says about our world right now?
I mean, well, from a football game perspective, it was a really bad football game. I will say I don't watch men's football, and I think the sport as it exists should probably be abolished. But I was a cheerleader my whole life, and
I didn't know this about you.
Yes, well, I was a competitive cheerleader, and when I got to high school, in order to be on the competition team, you had to cheer for the football games. So I ended up a sideline cheerleader for football season, kind of by accident. But in writing my book, it was actually really helpful because my co-author has played football and I was involved in game day culture in a different way, and particularly in a way that a lot of women and girls only have access to, which is through, band or cheer or, some sort of sideline way of, kind of getting in. So I think a lot about that as football as spectacle. But the football was really bad, I will say. Bad Bunny was amazing.
Yes.
But I just what a depressing football game. It felt very anticlimactic, and I also kind of feel like that's sort of what we deserve. I don't know.
Yes. I'll candidly say, I watch for the commercials and the halftime
which were also
show.
bad, and they were all AI.
It was all AI. And also like even when the ad wasn't about AI, it was using AI, like the Duncan
Yes.
ad, which I have a complicated relationship with Duncan because I am a New Englander. My drink order hasn't changed since I was 16, but I've never been served the same drink twice at Duncan
No.
because that's the culture. And, you know, it is a corporate entity, et cetera. However, their use of AI de-aging technology in so many of the nostalgia commercials was really a downer for me. So it's like you either had ads that were explicitly for AI companies or ads that were leaning too heavily into AI tools. And it all felt bleak to me. It also just felt like no one wanted to be offensive and no one wanted to take a stand on anything except Mike Tyson telling us
Yeah, well,
basically no fat chicks on behalf of Robert Kennedy Jr. Did we need that? I don't think so.
we didn't. I don't know. He described himself at one point as like obese and like jiggly, and I was like, "Oh, are you trying to turn me on right now? How did you know what my type is?" And he is having the opposite impact of
Oh
like what
my
you thought.
God. No, Frankie. No. Oh my God. That kills me. Well, it also like killed me that he was like, my sister died because she was fat. And I was like, sir, what are you doing? Like, I mean, this woman is dead. And then like he just bites into an apple and like his solution is like, just started eating apples. I
Well,
mean,
an apple a day keeps the doctor away, I
keeps
guess.
the doctor away, but doesn't keep you away. You're there. You're there for Mike Tyson. I mean,
Is anyone?
that was a shock. But I will say that like I always wished football, like I watched Little Giants growing up and like I feel like that has a place in your oeuvre because it does prominently have a girl quarterback. And then to
Yeah.
grow up and learn that that was not going to happen in the NFL was a rude awakening for me.
Yeah, and I think as I mentioned, I do think the sport as it exists is very bad for a lot of reasons. Like the
Mhm.
NFL is bad as an entity. The racial politics and like plantation politics of football in general are very bad. Um, but then at the same time, you have this part, with the women's sports boom, a lot of people are looking at football and like, why is this not happening around football? And part of it is that it really is considered a men's sport. It's considered a very like masculine game in a way that not a lot of other sports are. I think people are still really uncomfortable with the idea of women playing a game as violent as football. But at the same time, where we do see the push, the NFL is investing, right, it's in flag, it's in girls flag football. And I'm so torn because part of me is like, I actually think flag should be the future of football, and I love
Mm.
this,
Mhm.
but they're not equally investing in boys flag, and it feels kind of paternalistic and sexist. It's this
Yeah.
weird like, no, I don't think equal opportunity brain damage is a feminist win, and at the same time it feels really sexist that
Yes.
that we're only investing in girls flag and not boys. So
Yes.
yeah, it's
It's a
very
mess.
complicated.
It's very complicated. It's a mess. And I'll just say candidly, like I did turn it off after the halftime show because that's what I was wanting to see,
Yeah.
which I thought was excellent. I am dying at the social media posts of like how to become a Latina in 10 easy steps. Like this is what Lady Gaga read before the halftime show. Have you seen all these posts?
I have seen some of them, and yeah, the
It's
Lady
like
Gaga
the Lady Gaga
of it
of it
all. I
all.
mean, she is Bad Bunny's like hero's favorite
Yes.
artist. So I love that for him. And I
Yes.
also, I don't speak Spanish, but I've seen translations of, right before she starts to sing, he says, "Is this what you wanted?" And then it's the only portion that's in English. So it was very
Mm,
clearly like a middle finger
yeah.
to all of the criticisms about him performing in Spanish.
You know, I have certain blind spots for people in pop culture where I'm like, I can't play about this person. And unfortunately, Lady Gaga is one of them. Like, I don't play about Lady Gaga. I don't play about Mariah Carey. I don't play about Michelle Kwan. You know, it's a random list, but it's deeply
It's a
felt.
good
And
list.
okay, thank you. You know, I do what I can. But I switched over to the Olympics, and I need to talk about the Olympics with you because I talked about the figure skating competition on my last episode with a figure skating journalist. And, I do love figure skating as a sport, but I think the Olympics are a really complicated, problematic organization. And I did not know that you have personal connection to the Olympics in your lore. So I would love if you could share some of that.
Yeah, before I was a sports journalist, I did community organizing and I organized against the Boston 2024 Olympic bid. I think I showed you, but I still have. The reason I actually have these is because I'm supposed to send them to people who are like Olympics historians because I have my No
I
Boston
love this.
2024 stickers.
I
Still.
I love that. So can you talk a little bit about like what did that organizing look like? How do you push back against, because some cities are so seduced into thinking that hosting the Olympics will be great for the city, great for the economy. It is none of those things.
No, it's terrible. It's terrible for the host cities. There's a book about the No Boston Olympics, and it doesn't tell the full story because part of what I think made this push to defeat the bid successful was that there were two main factions that were organizing against the bid. There was No Boston Olympics, who was very much the public face of the like opposition. They were corporate, they wore suits, they were white and cis and straight and respectable. And behind the scenes, they also understood that they needed people who could do a lot more direct action and be much more disruptive. Like that activism and disruption is a multi-pronged thing. You need multiple approaches. And so I was part of a group called No Boston 2024. We were composed of mostly queer people, local Black organizers, sex workers, homeless folks, people who worked against like surveillance technology, things like that. So kind of groups of marginalized people. Um,
Mm-hmm. Who get stuff done.
yes, when the bid failed, we were blamed. The mayor called us, said the bid was defeated by 10 people on Twitter. I was one of the 10 people on Twitter.
Wow.
So, it
Wow.
was way
Huge.
more than just ten people on Twitter, right? It was a bigger,
Oh my God.
but that was really, I think, what made us successful because yeah, the public faces of the opposition would kind of quietly behind the scenes be like, hey, here's a tip, or like, we would communicate at least a little bit on what each group was doing so that we could work together because that's what it takes to do things like this. Unfortunately, in the book, our group isn't named. None of the organizers that were part of that are named directly. So I find that to be
What?
really disappointing. I don't think it's surprising when we think about who gets to tell stories from history. And it is often the marginalized people who are left
Mm-hmm.
out of those stories.
Yeah. Wow. Sorry, my brain is processing how, the 10 people on Twitter who defeated this bid would be somehow erased from the history. But to your point, that's how history works a lot of
It is, and
times.
there's newspaper stories. At one point, the mayor said he'd heard no opposition to the bid, no one. So we showed up to his house at like 2 a.m, with the Olympic music playing out of a speaker, and it's like, you
Oh
can't say
my
you didn't know. Like here we are,
Oh my God.
that
You
kind of
kind of
stuff.
like Scrooged him. You sort of like were ghost visiting him in the night.
The bid
A
fell
conscience,
apart
if you
really
will.
quickly. The bid really did fall apart pretty quickly, and I will say that that's great. And then part of me is like a little bummed because we definitely had like a plan of escalation. We were going to amp up the direct action. We had some pretty good ideas. So
What
um,
was like the best idea that you didn't get to actually do?
we wanted to do so. Some of this requires understanding Boston as a city, but like one of the things, the equestrian events were supposed to take place in Franklin Park, which is in the middle of the city. It has like historically like Black communities on like three sides of it. You can't do equestrian events there. There's absolutely no way. And so we were having a lot of fun thinking about what kind of action we could do to show and highlight the just absurdity of thinking that you could put equestrian events on there. They also said it was going to be a walkable games, and they were proposing like sailing events taking place in New Bedford, which is 45 minutes south of Boston. Yeah,
What?
and so we were going to try to walk it. Like have some people just like take off
Oh
walking
my
Boston to New
God.
Bedford and see how long it took them. Just like I think things like that.
Yeah.
I think people sometimes think of direct action as it can be shutting down streets and highways and things like that, but sometimes it really is, it can be much less high stakes than that, but is still like
Yeah.
kind of highlighting, the problems or the absurdity or, the conflicts of interest, whatever it may be that you're trying to accomplish as an organizer.
Absolutely. I would love to like there should be some kind of book or something that puts that bid defeat in conversation with the other great bid defeats in history. Like I love that Denver, the city of Denver defeated the bid during the for the bicentennial
Yeah,
Olympics.
I
Like,
have a book somewhere about that. The Olympics That Never Happened by Adam Berg.
ooh, yes, that's a great book. Yes. Also like it blows my mind that Lake Placid literally built a facility. Yeah.
Sorry,
You know where I'm
I'm
going with this.
reacting.
You know where I'm going with this. Lake Placid, as part of their bid, was like, oh, we hear that people don't want this here because they think it'll be a waste of funds and like facilities that will never be used again. So don't worry. We've been really smart about this. We're going to build a facility that will be the Olympic Village, like it's going to house the athletes. And then after the games, it'll be a prison,
And someone
which it
said,
still
great
is.
idea. Great idea.
Someone was like, great. Wow, really outside the box thinking. Great, awesome, let's do it. And it's, even the athletes, like during those games were like, this place is bleak.
Yes.
Like they were like, who
In Lake
thought this was
Placid.
a good idea?
No offense, but Lake
In
Placid
Lake
is already kind
well,
of bleak.
it's a commitment to live in Lake Placid. You have to be committed to the place or have some reason why you're staying there. We're in the film, we're in winter right now. I'm like losing my mind. I'm a Leo. I'm not meant to be in this weather, but here we are. So I think about that all the time. And I keep every like 6 months, I keep Googling the prison because I'm like, how can this still be real?
It's still real. I looked it up actually because last week I sent out like it's really an anti-Olympics reading list, but I call it an Olympics reading list for the politically inclined fan. And
Great.
did a bunch
Great
of
branding.
summarizing and things and book recommendations, but also I think highlighting the ways that the Olympics are political, whether or not the IOC wants to admit that they are. And yeah, it was like and I was trying to be very Winter Olympics focused for obvious reasons. And so I was
Yeah.
Googling, is the Lake Placid Olympic Village prison still in operation? And it is.
Sure is. I Google it and then I also like look up if prisoners have filed complaints, and there are so many complaints about the living conditions in that prison that I'm like, how is this place still functional? Like it's a metaphor in the form of a place, and yet like the metaphor has not reached the people it needs to reach
There's
about what's going on.
probably real connections to be made too with the ICE detention situation currently and the ICE agents being sent to the Olympics, etc., etc. There's got to be some connective tissue here
There's
between those
just
things.
there's 1 + 1 = 2. Well, and also just like Vance being shown at the opening ceremonies getting booed. Every other stream is acknowledging the booing and having it play, and then NBC mutes it in prime time.
And yeah, it's propaganda. It's essentially government
It's
propaganda. And
just
I was really disturbed by. So one of the first events that happened even before the opening ceremony was, women's hockey started. And the first U.S. women's hockey game, they cut to JD Vance in the crowd with Marco Rubio. And they were sitting with two former Olympians, Jocelyn and Monique Lamoureux, I want to say. They were,
okay.
they're twins. And they were longtime members of the U.S. Hockey team, won gold medals at the Olympics. And they were sitting with JD Vance and Marco Rubio. And what a lot of people probably do not realize is that that was much more than just supporting the U.S. hockey team. that was very much a victory lap for anti-trans sports people, because Britta Curl is on the ice as part of the U.S. Hockey team, women's hockey team, and she has been aligned with anti-trans advocacy in women's sports. She is an ambassador for like Fierce Athlete, I think it's called. They pretty explicitly say that they're rooting out, trans ideology in sport. And the Lamoureux twins also have been very vocally against trans women competing in sports, and they were there to support Britta Curl. And I think the important context that's missing here is a week or two before the games started, it became public knowledge that USA Hockey had quietly banned all trans athletes from all levels of hockey, including club leagues. And so you have Britta Curl representing the United States in, for USA Hockey, who has just banned all trans athletes. And then you have anti-trans politicians and anti-trans former athletes sitting together in the stands. And for me, that was a victory lap for the anti-trans sports crowd. And it was so clear and so obvious to me that that's what was happening. But no one on a broadcast is ever going to point that out.
And what kills me about all of this is that when there is a regime change, let's assume that there's
it's got to happen at some point.
At some point. Okay. I recently watched a documentary called Riefenstahl, about Leni Riefenstahl. And it was fascinating in the sense that she assiduously curated her own archive. She kept everything, including hate phone calls, support phone calls. She's going on all these talk shows for the rest of her life, trying to assert that she wasn't a Nazi. She had no idea what was going on. She didn't know about the Holocaust. And the film very clearly shows she absolutely did, right? And was trying to hide it. But what kills me about thinking about her life and the way that after she absolutely was a voice for the fascist state, for the Nazis, presenting their views on film, which were then celebrated as like, these are amazing films, like Olympia, including her film about the Summer Olympics. She then is like, well, I didn't know what was going on. I wasn't promoting them. I basically just throwing up her hands and saying, like, I just worked here.
Right.
I didn't know what was going on. And that is unfortunately the same vibe that I'm seeing with mainstream journalists like NBC, like the US Open putting out a press release saying you may not share any, like if there's any video of people booing Trump when he showed up at the US men's final, you can't air that. They're muting when Vance is booed at the opening ceremonies. These people are going to say at some point, well, I just worked at NBC and they told me to mute it. And like the ways that individuals become complicit in structural choices to promote anti-trans folks by putting them on camera, by grouping them together, all of that, people have to realize if they're taking part in it, if they're watching it, one, realize what you're seeing, but also if you're working behind the scenes, it's like you are part of it. Like it's these small choices that are promoting this message in ways that are not subtle.
Yeah. And I think it's really upsetting that not a single U.S. women's hockey player has come out and said anything against the trans ban that we just found out about, especially considering how openly queer women's hockey is. And I think it's always really important to remember when we talk about hockey and women's hockey too, is that it's a much more conservative, culturally conservative sport than a lot of the other ones because of how white it is. And so politically, it's not always as aligned. And I think we sometimes have a misconception about women's sports and women's leagues and women's athletes where fandom attributes a level of progressiveness or, a political stance to them sometimes that they don't necessarily have or isn't always wholly earned. But even with all that context, I think I was hopeful that at least one U.S. women's hockey player would have said something about the trans ban. And, the fact that there's none. I mean, there's an openly non-binary player in the PWHL right now who plays alongside, like is the teammate of some of these people. And the ban doesn't explicitly exclude them, because the PWHL isn't USA Hockey, but for lots of sticky reasons that I, around transition and medicalization that aren't really our business. But I think it's really disheartening to see that not only do you have nobody saying anything, but you actually have a player on the team who is advocating for these policies, and like no one else can speak up.
And it's like, this is their life. You know, like, why, if you're somebody's teammate, that to me is part of being on a team. And, you know, to not see that happening is, it's really disconcerting. And I do want to point people to your writing on the NHL and the PWHL. Wait, hold on. Give me that acronym, Professional Women's Hockey
PWHL,
League.
yeah.
I am so bad with acronyms, it would scare you. But I love your writing on the hypocrisy of the owners of the team who are in some cases supporting ICE financially, supporting homophobic, transphobic organizations, while also claiming to be doing pride nights, even as like pride nights have been dialed down, or like the rainbow tape ban that happened. Like there have been all of these things where the league wants to kind of head fake that they're inclusive, while behind the scenes absolutely doing things that are the opposite of that.
Yeah. So I think if we look at the PWHL and the NHL separately, because they are, as I was saying, where often I think a level of progressive ideology is often attributed to women's leagues in a way that we don't expect men's leagues to have. But the PWHL specifically, right, there's this huge women's sports boom. Also, every single team in the women's hockey tournament at the Olympics has at least one current or former PWHL player. It's the first time that we are seeing the Winter Olympics while the PWHL exists. And so there's this massive international platform that hopefully will push more audience back, funnel more audience back to the league itself. And that kind of goes along with this huge women's sports boom we're seeing. And often what we hear is this kind of call to uncritically invest in women's sports. And when we call for investment, that money has to come from somewhere. And who has the money to invest? It's billionaires. Billionaires have the money to invest. That is where this money is coming from. And I think that's why I have a lot of problems when we just talk about growth as kind of a net positive no matter what, because growth always comes at someone's expense. And in the case of the PWHL, the very public face of ownership of the league is Billie Jean King and her wife, Alana Kloss. But they're also partial owners of the Dodgers. And the other major owner of the Dodgers is Mark Walter, and he is the other big investor in the PWHL. So he owns, differently than the WNBA, where there's different ownership groups for each team, the PWHL is centrally owned by essentially Mark Walter's group.
Okay.
And when you look at the investments that Mark Walter's group makes, multiple companies that he is the CEO of invest in Palantir, which makes the technology that ICE uses to surveil and monitor immigrants. And then another company he has that invests in, it's a private prison company that has major contracts to build immigrant detention centers. And so he's literally funding ICE. And so you have this league that, is, we say it's progressive, and they're having a moment of silence at, games for Renee Good and Alex Preddy, who were murdered by, ICE in Minnesota, and they're having moments of silence for these people in a team that's actually being, is owned by someone who is actually funding the people who are doing this state-sanctioned violence. So it's all very sticky, right? And so, right? And that's and then you expect the women's league to be better, and I guess in some ways it is, but then on the flip side of that, you have the NHL, and they are seeing, so the NHL is all men's leagues are homophobic, really, kind of across the board. It's why we don't really see any out male athletes. The NHL is somehow worse, which is funny. The bar is really bad, but the NHL has been very, very bad. And then Heated Rivalry came out and was such a phenomenon. And I think very quickly the league realized that it couldn't distance itself from this, this boom. And the NHL's viewership has been so bad. Like, I don't know how to tell you how bad the NHL's viewership has been. Like, under 300,000 viewers for like opening night games. That's like ballpark. It's bad.
That's
So
really bad.
the league could have tried to diversify their fan base a long time ago by recruiting people that maybe they don't think of as their fans, women, queer people, right? Like people of color who are less likely to watch hockey. There were a lot of ways that they could have really tried to broaden the audience a long time ago, and they've never done that. Instead, they have, in just the last couple of years, had bans on Pride tape, which is the rainbow tape that some players use to show allyship and support for the LGBTQ community. You had bans on Pride nights, teams, because people didn't want to wear the jerseys, the Pride jerseys. And you really saw this roll back of feeling like queer people were welcome. And queer people have historically not felt very welcome at men's sporting events, but it really felt, the opposite. And then you have this show come out that is a phenomenon. I mean, ticket sales have gone up 40% for NHL games since
Wow, I didn't
Heated
know
Rivalry
that.
dropped. And that's wild. And so then you have the commissioner out here, Gary Bettman, being like, we welcome all these unique opportunities to drive new fans. And I'm like, no, you don't. Like,
Babe, it's like, babe, have you seen the show?
actually,
Like,
wait till next season. You're the villain. You're the main villain in the next
yeah,
book.
exactly. Oh my God. It's like, yeah, it just blows my mind where like they co-opt this stuff and they don't even like actually check out the content before they co-opt it. They're just like, okay, great, this is going to look good for us. We're just going to start talking about this. Like, I think you reported on the Oilers using Pink Pony Club as their victory song
Yeah.
because they heard it at a dinner, but they didn't really maybe understand what the song was about or talk about
Yeah,
that in
and
any
like
way.
maybe I'm in the minority here. I felt the same way when a bunch of baseball teams used, Robin's Dancing on My Own as well, which obviously Robin is not specifically queer, but her music is very culturally queer and she
It's a
is,
sacred text.
yeah,
That song is a sacred text. It should not be misused.
it feels very like these, I'm not going to call everyone in these leagues straight because we know they're not, but at least publicly they're straight, and the
Yeah.
leagues are culturally straight, and they're appropriating these songs from queer communities and stripping them, especially Pink Pony Club, which is literally about finding belonging in a gay
Yeah.
club.
It's not, there's no subtext. It's
No,
all surface
it's
text.
it's
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 right
right
there.
there, and to take these things and strip the queerness from them and strip the context and meaning out of them, and then use them as like your song, I just find it deeply upsetting. Like, really,
Well, it's even
truly.
like when they use We Are the Champions by Queen,
Right.
which is also a queer song. And, without any context, it's like in some ways in those spaces, when you hear those songs, it makes me feel lonelier
Yeah, I
than when I hear them elsewhere. Cause I'm like, oh, like it reminds you of like how uncomfortable, this is just my experience, how uncomfortable I feel in the space.
yeah.
When I hear something that makes me feel like myself, I'm like, oh, I guess I didn't realize how uncomfortable I was until I heard this. And I don't want to hear it with these other people who don't get it, you
Yes. I
know?
mean, I have my partner is a trans man who, passes as cis, and I am non-binary in a way that I'm still mostly read as a woman, which is very weird. I think we're read as like an alternative straight couple most places that we go, but we're like both trans
Mm.
and like very gay. And so it is a very weird experience because we can sort of like,
Yeah.
we still stand out, but not because people think we're gay. Like, I just have, brightly colored hair and he has a nose ring. So I think it's like, a very like the quirky straights.
They're like, oh, they're cool. Like they're interesting. Maybe they're artists. Mainly for me, people just think I'm boring. They just think my wife and I are sisters. We get that a lot. And I'm like, please, I
Classic.
just I can't handle that
Gals,
today.
gals
Thank
being
you.
pals.
Just roommates, basically. It's the opposite of feeling of like going to a WNBA game.
Yes. Although this is actually very interesting. I want to know what you think about this. So
Okay.
people, mostly women, straight women, who are the main audience of Heated Rivalry, and all like, gay male romance has massive straight women fan base, which we can talk more
Yes,
about. But
we need to get into that. Yeah.
women are showing up to NHL games and like yelling "kiss" at the players, which I think is amazing. I love it. I love it. I'm a huge fan of it.
Yes.
Straight people are super mad about this and are calling it sexual harassment. And I personally do not agree with this.
I don't believe that's sexual harassment
They're not
at
naming
all.
specific players and telling them to
No.
kiss. And I think for me, the power dynamics involved here are really important. Like, this is again, culturally straight league. Most of the men on the ice are cis and straight. We've seen studies on their politics. It's the like most Republican league of any of them. You know, the chances of
Oof.
them being
Mm-hmm.
anti-queer is also quite high. And so there's something
Yes.
I think kind of subversive and amazing about yelling at them to kiss, especially when this is an audience that you have shunned. You've shunned women and queer people. Your league has wanted nothing to do with them, and now they're the ones showing up at your game. And it turns out you have no out openly gay players, and maybe that's the thing that would give you an audience. I don't know. There's something about it that I deeply love.
I love this so much. And in a space that is very hostile to queer people, culture that's hostile to queer people, I think that's amazing. It's like that's very punk rock of them to do that.
I love it. And I will say, here's how I know that we're right. Harrison Brown, who was in Heated Rivalry, he's
Yes.
the actor that got to show Ilya that Shane was dating Rose Landry.
Iconic
Yeah.
scene.
And he, for people that do not know, he played professional women's hockey, and he is the first pro hockey player to come out as trans while playing. So he's kind of lived
Historic.
experience in every single version of this kind of just the exact intersection of the actual sport and the show. And he was recently at an NHL game and he posted a picture to his stories and he wrote "kiss" on it. And I messaged him and was like, "So you think this is funny and acceptable behavior?" And he was like, "Absolutely." So I think that if Harrison Brown says
Okay,
that
thank
it's
you.
acceptable,
Thank you,
that it is.
Harrison. I
So
feel better. Because
yeah,
I'm thinking about it now. Like, if somebody did that at a WNBA game, I would think that would be offensive. Because that's a more queer space.
if men did it, see, here's the thing. Here's the
Yeah.
difference, right? If
Yeah,
men
that's
did
a good
it,
point.
also, I think I love the "I'm here looking for my wife" signs at WNBA games. We never accuse those people of sexual harassment.
No.
The women that have them, to be
Um,
clear, not the men. That's a whole
Not the
different,
men,
again,
no.
different power
Okay,
dynamic.
okay. But has anybody written about the fact that there are a lot of men who go alone, straight presenting men, who show up alone at WNBA games?
So I will say, as someone who, I'm a sports writer who focuses on women's sports, and I'm always surprised, and queer women's sports. So most of my readers are queer, but I also have a Discord.
The Discord's
So I
amazing.
have a Discord community that I run, and I'm always surprised that there are these amazing straight men who show up who are like hardcore women's basketball, hardcore women's sports fans. They're not weird, they're not creepy, they're just like massive fans of the sport. And I realized this is something that happened when I published my book. So my book is about the National Women's Football League, and it was so obscure. It had been so underreported. It didn't have a Wikipedia page. It didn't have anything. The people that got my book and went and made Wikipedia pages for every team and started entering like stats that they found in our book into like football nerd databases were football nerds. It was like people who are huge fans of
Wow.
the sport and care that much. And these were men. These were men who were like, "Ooh,
Yeah.
these are new pro teams that we didn't know about, and now we need to document them like in the historical record in the proper way." And so I think there is a
Wow.
segment of sports fans who really do care that much about the sport itself. And you know what? I love those men. They are welcome in my
Yeah.
Discord and at the WNBA games as far
We
as I
need
am
them.
concerned. Yeah.
It reminds me of like I was sort of kidnapped once and brought to Lilith Fair by a former boss.
Oh
It
wow, so
was
much just happened in
complicated
that
work.
in that sentence.
Sorry. I know. I dropped a lot of
I
lore
was
on you
gonna
right now,
say I'm
but
not the only one dropping lore on the podcast.
yes, you also are dropping. I mean, your lore was significant, but I had a summer job when I was in college, and our boss, who was very eccentric, not a great boss, at the end of the summer to my friend and I was like, I'm going to be taking you out as like a celebratory end of summer thing. So we thought she was going to take us out to dinner. And then suddenly she was like, actually, I'm going to take you to a Counting Crows concert. And we were like, we don't want that at that time. And it was sort of like we were voluntold, like we will be going during work hours to this outdoor concert. So we were like, okay, I guess it's better than working. Get in the car again with not a stranger, but it felt strange. I shouldn't have done it. Drive to the venue. We're driving. I'm noticing it's only women walking towards this outdoor venue. And I'm like, this is weird. I thought there were male Counting Crows fans. We park and suddenly our boss is like, oh, I actually bought like a season of tickets to this venue and I goofed and basically like today's Lilith Fair. So my friend and I
I'm
were like,
so jealous, actually.
what? And so, okay, it was amazing. I'm just going to say
Have you
that.
seen the
It was
documentary? Have you
amazing.
seen the Lilith Fair
Yes.
documentary that Dan Levy made? It's
Yes.
so good.
It's so good. Everyone, please go watch that. I want to reach out to that director and see if I can get them on the show. But that is a great documentary. First of all, they got Sarah McLachlan.
Mm-hmm.
She's the key. If they didn't have Sarah, that doc would be different. But I mean, the people I saw that day were amazing. But there was a bunch of straight men there alone and they were not threatening, but literally they would be like, a woman went up, this is very Lilith Fair, a woman went up to this man ahead of us on the lawn and she was like, excuse me, sir, I just want to thank you for being here today and for not being like gross. And he was like, so earnest. He was like, I'm just here to support the ladies. He's like, I'm a big fan. Big fan of Ingrid Michaelson. And it was like,
oh no,
oh my God.
My
like,
song at my first wedding, notice I said first, was it Ingrid Michaelson's?
I don't mean to trigger you.
That's okay. I got married in a rainbow
God.
dress and quoted the law that made same-sex marriage legal in Massachusetts because it wasn't federally legal yet. Anyway, I married a man, and I think there were signs.
Crying. No, Frankie.
There were a lot of signs that maybe I was like, I literally was
God.
like, we can get married, even though I'm really deeply uncomfortable with this because I'm queer and gay marriage isn't legal, but it's legal in this state. So we do have to read the Supreme, like the legal ruling that made it. We read the text in our ceremony.
Oh my God. Wow. Such an ally.
Yeah,
You're just such
truly.
an ally. So powerful. Oh my God. I'm crying. That's hilarious. My friend, who I'm still very good friends with, we were at the concert, the Indigo Girls come out. I'm like, oh my God. They were great. And my friend, totally sincere, very straight, turns to me and is like they're almost done with the whole performance. And she's like, do you think they're gay? Are they gay? And like, not in a like critical way, but she was just genuinely curious. Like, oh, are they gay? And I was like, girl, where do you think you are right now?
Most people around you are gay. I deleted TikTok recently, but before I did, one of my favorite genres of TikTok was like Gen Z women just finding out about Lilith Fair having been a thing and being like,
oh,
what is this amazing thing that nobody ever told me about? And I was like, wow. Wait, I didn't even think, because, you know, I graduated high school in 2003, so I was right in that age range where
that was 2004.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we knew what it was, and
we did.
I didn't even realize until I watched the documentary that it had only been like 3 years or something like that. They only did it a few years, because to me it's such a major cultural moment in my mind that I couldn't believe it was so short-lived and that it wasn't a thing that like the next generation even was on their radar at all.
I totally agree with you. And I also think, like, not to be critical of the documentary, but like maybe this is my own wish fulfillment, which I think is a theme also in Heated Rivalry, which at some point we'll get to, but there's just too many vital topics coming up, Frankie. We got to keep rolling. But I think at the end of the documentary, they're like, well, of course, this couldn't happen again. Lilith Fair couldn't happen again because like women artists have a huge following, like they're dominating pop, like the need isn't there. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't buy that, first of all. And second of all, it's even if you pivot and not think about what the artist would get out of it, or like, you know, that they have their own followings now, they don't need to band together. I think the community needs it. Like the community that's formed it. Like that's the part I was really jealous of watching the documentary. Mm-hmm. Like I was jealous of the people who got to go to the first iteration of Lilith Fair.
But also,
that was huge.
Isn't All Things Go basically just lesbian Lilith Fair? Like, they've done it 2 years in a row now. My favorite was the joke that All Things Go was Taylor Swift's reference for her next opening acts for her next tour, because all Taylor Swift does is have lesbians open for her. We won't get into the Gaylor rumors, but when I tell you if you go back to like 2014, it's not just like anyone, like Tegan and Sarah, and she introduces them as her favorite artists. She has Haley Kiyoko on the Reputation tour. She has Girl in Red. She has Muna. She has like, I mean, when you start to name who her
I
openers are,
mean,
it's not just like, it's not somebody who's big like Chapel Roan or like what. These are obscure lesbian artists that if you are not a lesbian, you do not know who this person
yes.
is.
If you're not in the community, you don't know who these people are. Like
No.
at that stage of their, and listen, don't even get me going on this, but like Carly Kloss flying cross country 3 weeks postpartum to stand in general admission at the LA show. Do I need to say more than that? I mean, there's lore around that. There's like a lot of
There's
like,
a lot of lore.
she's trying to piggyback on her own PR to get back in the spotlight and get people to forget she married a Kushner, and that's like
also
that's its own problem.
between I
but
married a Kushner and then Taylor Swift, we can circle back to the billionaires are terrible conversation if we want. We're really just
there's no such thing as an ethical billionaire.
No.
And having watched the Taylor Swift documentary series, or at least how much of it I could stomach, you need to see like basically one episode and then they're all the same. But she picks like a person of color on the tour and makes them like an example of like her largesse as a boss, where she's
Sure.
I helped them. Like I propped them up. I gave them this position. And it's like, yes, that's true. And like, why did you make a documentary about yourself that's an ad?
That's all she does.
Like, I know, but I'm just saying, Frankie, this is like, I want to do an episode for the show on Madonna's Truth or Dare. And like, as a jumping off point of musician documentaries and like, what are they meant to do? And like how the form has basically just become like infomercial. And like, but Taylor Swift is like the number one example of that to me.
Yeah.
And her allyship, scare quotes, is, the Gaylor rumors persist. I'll just say that. Her pushback to that Times article.
There's nothing that you can do to convince me that they weren't in a romantic relationship. And that's okay. No one needs to prove themselves to me. But that is, regardless of where she falls and identifies her sexuality, I firmly believe that was a romantic relationship, and that's okay. That's for me to believe. I went to Camp Gaylor. I went to Camp Gaylor and wrote about it for Cosmo. I went to a summer camp for Gaylors.
What? Frankie, explain right now.
I wrote about it for Cosmo. I got
and
them
why
to
wasn't
send
I
me.
invited?
It was so funny.
And why wasn't I invited?
I will tell you, this is one of my proudest moments as a freelancer because I fell down the Gaylor rabbit hole in the pandemic. I had never listened to Taylor Swift aside from like her singles. And Folklore came out and all the lesbians I knew were like very into what was happening. And I was like, I am missing something. Lesbians like this way too much. I'm clearly missing something. And this is how I fell down the Gaylor rabbit hole. So I was kind of in like Gaylor subreddits and stuff because I just was reading a lot of stuff and I'd been monitoring the community for a long time. And so they drop a link to an in-person weekend-long like retreat for Gaylors on the Cape, and I'm in Boston, so it was an hour and a half away. And
oh my God.
I was like, I have to go to this because it's what?
Of course.
And I was like, but I'm clearly going to be the oldest one there, so I can't register, and I don't want to pay the money. Can I get a publication to take me? And within an hour, I had Cosmo agree to send me, which was great. So I ended up writing a feature about the camp. And actually part of why I wanted to write it was because all the press that the Gaylor community had gotten up until that point was, I thought, deeply homophobic and deeply misogynist. They were painted as delusional, as crazy, as all of this stuff. And then they were also subject to massive amounts of doxing. Like Rolling Stone ran an article about a study that had been done looking at fandoms, and the Gaylor fandom was subjected to the most amount of harassment. People were, being bullied off the internet, and it was really, really bad. And having observed the community for a long time, I felt protective a little bit, I think, of these baby gays, which is the majority of what this community was. And you can look at any kind of fandom as a spectrum, right? You're going to have, the heated rivalry fandom right now is a very good example of how you have this spectrum of people who are going to be at one end, and they're going to be, yeah, taking things too far and, deeply inappropriate and really, maybe delusional, but the majority of people
Sure.
are going to be, on the other end of that spectrum. And for the most part, what I saw was a bunch of young queer people who, A, found community that shared an interest of theirs, and B, learned a hell of a lot about their own culture and queer history by following a lot of the queer flagging that was being identified in Taylor Swift's music. And I'm like, these are people who are doing what anyone with an English degree does, which is doing a queer reading of a
Yes.
text, right? That's all they're doing.
Yes.
And to be vilified in the way that they were, and I could see how much the community meant to the people that were in it. And so I felt like I wanted to write something that highlighted that piece of it, and that really was
Mm-hmm.
like, actually, they don't care whether Taylor Swift is queer or not. They're actually here for the people that they
Yes.
have met and the things that they have learned through loving her music. And like, that's
Yes.
kind of the heart of it.
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah, I think a lot of the Kaylor stuff is really not about Taylor Swift. It's about, in a similar way to Heated Rivalry, like as you're coming into your queerness, a lot of people seize on things in pop culture that feel like references or a language they can absorb to describe their own queerness and to find community with other people who are on that journey. And that's why I felt protective of them too, in the sense of when that Times piece came out with Tree Payne's dismissal of them and
Hmm.
labeling it as like horrifically offensive to Taylor Swift and damaging. To be clear, whatever goes on with Taylor Swift is not my business. However, I agree with you that I think she was in a relationship with Karlie Kloss. And if you claim to be an ally, which she has done in, oh my God, what's that?
Calm down.
What's that song? You need to calm down. I hate that song.
It's
Anyway,
terrible.
it's not good. But if you really feel like an ally, then you should be cool with people using your music or even like wild speculations about your life that you know to be false to tell their own story, to explore themselves. And like she deserves her privacy, whatever.
She's still
And
never
I
come
think
out as
there's
straight, right? She's never said she's straight still to
she's
this
never
day.
she's never going to beat those rumors. I don't believe the Travis Kelsey relationship. I think Wood is one of the most embarrassing songs ever put to record and is almost camp in its over the top embrace of cis sexuality.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speculate too publicly, but blank, if we read the song Blank Space much more literally, it's about PR relationships. So just go with
Yep.
that. What? I've got a blank space and I'll
Whew.
write your name and we'll leave it there.
Oh my God. Yes. I'm afraid to say too much because I think, as I've told you, I've never gotten as much hate mail as when I wrote that actually romantic was actually homophobic.
Oh, I
And
love
people were,
that's when I messaged you about that, right? That's how we first connected because
yes,
I was like, thank you for writing
yes.
this because this is what I have been furious about. And you wrote it. Thank you.
It's so obvious to me. Like, if you listen to the song, the trope that you would denigrate a perceived enemy by saying they must, particularly same gender enemy, by saying, well, they must be obsessed with and in love with you, is so ridiculous and inappropriate at this stage that the fact that she leans into that is, especially with her history, either like an overcorrection, trying to misdirect, or let's say she's straight, it's deeply homophobic.
Yeah.
No one should do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that whole album is like there's such a lack of self-awareness in her songwriting, her positionality as a billionaire with a lot
Yeah,
of
I think
influence and
I
privilege.
wish she had the self awareness to have retired after the Eras tour, or at least just like stopped for a very long time.
Yes, she needed to go away
And
for
I
a
don't think she knows how
while.
to do that, unfortunately. I don't think she knows how to go away.
I think, yeah, she's addicted to being Taylor Swift TM, and that's not helping her music. But they all get too addicted to it in the end. Like I mentioned Madonna before, like Madonna also should have retired after you name it a long time ago. No offense, girl, but it doesn't help your legacy. But it's like you're addicted to the adulation, to the affirmation.
It changes your brain chemistry, like having that much money and being famous and I have a very, very, very tangential sort of lens. My partner's dad is in the music industry, and so he grew up around famous people, and he talks about it all the time, how when you are famous for a very long time, which is also similar to when you have lots and lots of money, like, billionaires do, and she happens, so we're talking about both of those things. You are so divorced from the like experience of the average person and the perspective of the average person, and it's really hard to not be unless you are surrounding yourself with people who are going to like actively challenge you. But again, once you get to a certain level of fame or, monetary success, it's actually harder to find those kinds of people who will be that person for you. And so, yeah, and I think there's even been studies that it changes your brain chemistry. It really
I
like,
believe it.
yeah, you just don't,
You can't function as a real
yeah,
person. I mean, I mentioned music documentaries before. I guess I just have it on my brain chemistry right now, but the Beatles anthology was just reissued. And if anyone has ever seen that, Paul McCartney, for reasons that are never explained, and it is not relevant at all to any interview, does some of his interviews while piloting a tugboat.
sure, of course, why
And
not?
and this is like such an example of this where it's like no one ever said to him, Paul, this makes no sense. Why a tugboat?
Why not a tugboat is really
I
the,
mean, okay, Frankie, you see, and you're the person in the room who's like not challenging Paul. You're the reason he's in the tugboat, okay?
okay,
And I'm the
I take
person
the
in
blame.
his entourage who's like, you know what, Paul, like, gonna stop dyeing your hair. I feel like that's the move. And Heather Mills also not the move. And anyway, a lot of inappropriate stuff. But, all to say, yeah, there's a lot with Taylor Swift. There's a lot with like she's writing fan fiction about herself that she is selling us, and
Yeah.
she wants people to look for Easter eggs in her work. And then when people actually do that but tell a story that she doesn't like, then suddenly that's a violation.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because as an artist, once you create art and release it into the world, it's no longer yours.
Yeah.
And people are going to respond in ways that you could not have foreseen. And that's actually not your problem, and it's not your business.
Right.
It becomes your
Yeah.
business when it becomes intrusive into your personal life in ways, that are inappropriate. And I think this is where the heated rivalry fandom comes in with the men at the center of the show, the
Yes.
actors at the center of the show, and the way that their personal life has been violated by a segment of the fandom. But aside, but unless if you're engaging with the art as art and not doing weird like IRL shipping of actual people, the way that
Yeah.
the world responds to your art and the meaning that they make of it is actually not in your control.
Yeah, at that point, you kind of have to log off. Like, I really do feel like the only feedback in the world is useful feedback. And so, if you're writing something, if you're making a record, you get that feedback while it's in process. Once it's out, as you say, it doesn't belong to you really anymore. And there's nothing you can do about it. The stories people are going to tell about it, the interpretation, you kind of just need to move on or just not engage. But I do think okay, let's pivot to Heated Rivalry because there's so much to say about that. Before we even talk about it in a sort of a critical way and the lore around it, the actors, what is your relationship to Heated Rivalry? Like, I would
Okay,
love to hear.
I had never read the books. I'm working my way through them now after
Same.
seeing the show. I am not generally a romance reader, but I feel very, again, when we talk about things that are often feminized and dismissed by patriarchal society, because of these misogynist beliefs, romance is one of those things. And so I'm someone who doesn't read a lot of romance, but I am tangentially around the like discussion of romance, if that makes sense. And I follow a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people who are romance authors or like think like engage critically with it as a genre. So I have like enough context to understand like the genre and the kind of space that Heated Rivalry occupies, both in the world of books specifically and like I have watched the show. I don't actually want to admit how many times I've watched the show because it's deeply embarrassing, because I do sometimes feel like one of the fans I've said is like, it's bad. Okay. My threads
Uh-oh.
algorithm has gotten really skewed because you can post by topic there, and I'm trying to drive content to my newsletter where I've written about Heated Rivalry, and I have now ended up on like Heated Rivalry fandom threads to the point that like I now have beef with fanfic writers that I do not know. I'm not a fanfic reader personally. I like understand fanfic,
Okay.
but it's not how I engage
Sure.
in fandom generally. I am what they call a curative fandom participant, where I like to gather lore and information and that kind of thing. I do less of
Absolutely.
the transformative fandom of, fanfic and stuff like that. And that's okay. But I have now gotten my algorithm is so messed up that I'm now like beefing with Heated Rivalry, like fandom fanfic authors over like really dumb things. And I really need to fix the algorithm. So they'll be like, I'm on my
I
God
love
knows
that.
what reheat, which is what they call a rewatch. And I'm like, I'm also on that number, but does that make me as bad
So
as
you're not comfortable disclosing the
I
number.
don't
You
know the
feel
number.
like
It's
that's
kind of the
going to be
only thing
damaging.
giving me like dopamine right now. So I do just sort
Hmm.
of keep restarting it.
Yes.
But it's brilliant. And this
I
is the other thing about me is that I'm a writer and I'm a craft nerd, and to for me to watch it, I find it to be narratively really, really well done. I find
hmm
the music and the performances from Connor Story and Hudson Williams are phenomenal. And so I think for me at this point, I have just really enjoyed kind of dissecting it from like an artistic standpoint and really appreciate it for like what a work of art it is.
Yeah, I can appreciate all of that. I'm also working my way through the books. And so I'm someone who also I do read romance. I only read queer romance, but I do read romance. So I can appreciate it as part of that larger genre. I only read women queer romance, so it's interesting, and I hope we'll get into who is the audience for
Yeah.
MLM romance. But I think as a person who loves process, I think the way that these books have been adapted to the show is fascinating and really well done because it's a big challenge. Like book one is actually episode 3.
Hmm.
And so I think that works really well for setting up like the arc that they want to pursue. And just like you said, the dopamine hit, we're living in a time where it's like, I don't know how, like, it's dark, it's bleak. So to have something that centers queer joy and queer possibility, I think is so needed right now. The tenderness that they have for each other, the discovery, and as you've written about too, the portrayal of autism in a way that I think is really complex and really just great.
I Yeah, I am very impressed with the way the books have been adapted. Once I understood what the kind of narrative arc of the whole series was, I was like, oh, this is wonderful IP. I see why, especially with more seasons, the bar that Kip is like home base is gonna, if it follows the books, the world expands into that bar. And I think there's for television, there's so much rich potential for the
Mm,
world of, I don't like the queers who are living very openly and much more embedded in queer culture, and then the hockey players to mix. There's a lot of conflict and growth that is potential that can be set up there, and I'm excited to see how that goes. I think that Rachel Reed is very good at world building and creating
hmm
characters, and I don't necessarily think that the craft of writing is her strong suit, and like that's okay. We all, but like,
Yeah. But we have different skill
yeah,
sets, you know?
I know I have weaknesses as a writer too. It's just kind of, and
Sure,
the thing
everybody
that
does.
people
Yeah.
don't understand too is a lot of romance, and she started as a fanfic writer before writing these books, and a lot of people are kind of writing on their own without editors, without formal training. Like, so
Yeah.
this is not a knock on Rachel. Clearly, she's very skilled,
Not at all.
but I've been very impressed with the adaptation. I will say yes, there is queer joy, but here's one of the things I've been beefing on threads about is
Oh.
particularly I've seen like from straight women calling it, such a happy ending, and how joyful it is. And I actually don't think it's a happy ending at all.
Yeah.
It's a devastating ending. And I appreciated actually that Hudson Williams, who plays Shane, has said as much in interviews. I think he
hmm
called it bittersweet. But he's like, they didn't
Yeah.
come out. They got caught.
Yep.
They are driving
Yes.
away back to the cottage to be hidden again. They will not be
Yes.
coming out to teammates. They will not be coming out to friends. This relationship is still a secret that could threaten like both of their livelihoods. And,
Yeah.
Shane's mom says, oh, that's so sad when they say, yeah, we're just going to keep this a secret until we retire. I think I've found it very difficult to see a lot of the straight fans of this show prop it up as such like a happy, because we know about romance, you either get a
Yeah.
happily ever after or a happy for
Right.
now. This is a happy for
Right.
now. Let's be clear about
Yes.
what we're seeing.
I'm glad you're saying this because when I said you see queer joy, I mean, we see them move from like a hooking up
Hmm.
relationship to like they are have the emotional vulnerability to say like I love you and they're committed to each other at the end. But everything else around it actually like I found it very difficult to watch particularly the first 3 episodes of the show because I find stories I don't read a lot of romances where people are closeted.
Hmm.
Like I find that really challenging. It just like not triggering per se, but I don't like being reminded of like how difficult it is to pass or to be constantly worrying about like are people going to find out this thing about me that could hurt me if people knew. And there is a kind of there's multiple wish fulfillments I think happening in the show. Like there's wish fulfillment for straight women watching this, and I would love to hear what you think is driving straight women's interest in this, but I'll say like from my perspective, like as a queer person watching, there's sort of wish fulfillment that is difficult of like parental response, like that it's not negative, it's not
Yeah.
abusive, and in fact there's a scene where his mom says I'm sorry that you felt like you couldn't tell me.
Yeah. And
And
that's not in the
it
books.
kind of
That's not in the
right,
books. And I think that's
right,
where having a queer male showrunner, a gay male showrunner, makes this, he takes the female lens. I don't know what Rachel Reed's sexuality is. It's not our business, but she's not a
right.
gay man. We know that much. And
Yeah.
it was adapted by a gay man. And so a lot of the changes that were made to the show were specifically done with an eye towards gay male culture. And I think that's what makes some of this authentic, or some of it is that wish fulfillment of the mom saying, I'm sorry that you
Yeah,
felt you couldn't tell
it was
me.
giving like that. Have you seen Love, Simon?
Yes.
So it's kind of like that scene in Love, Simon where it's like Love, Simon goes even further where the dad is like, "Can I help you make your Grinder profile or
Hmm.
something?" And you're like, "Oh my god, Josh Duhamel, like say less." But
Yeah.
it's sort of like as a queer person, like it's like yeah, like that's wish fulfillment. Like if you didn't have parents who said that to you or anything like, "I'm sorry you couldn't tell me."
Yeah.
And I want to talk to you about it. I want to hear about this part of you that I'm just learning about, which didn't happen for me, right? So I was
Or
watching it and it
me.
made me sad because I was like, oh, wow, I wish that my parents had reacted this way when I
Yes.
came out to them.
If you watch the scene when they're all at the table in the parents' cabin, and Shane's mom says, sit like, Ilya kisses Shane, and his mom says, since rookie season, and dad says the summer
Yeah.
before, she looks heartbroken because she's realizing that she has missed 8 years of
Mm-hmm.
knowing her son fully. This
Yes.
man, even if they say they weren't in love at the beginning, which I think is, questionable based on the clues we're
Right.
given in the
Yes.
show, regardless,
Yes.
he's been involved with somebody for eight
Right.
years, and she has not known that part of him at all. And I think she's realizing the extent of what she missed in that moment. To me,
Mm-hmm.
that's how I read that scene. It like breaks my
Yes.
heart as a parent too,
Yes.
because I'm a parent and I can imagine what that would feel
Yes.
like.
Yes. It's so deeply affecting and there's such grief in that scene. And so it's like there's so much sadness in at the end of the first season for everyone for different reasons, but so that was like my reading of it. Like I felt like so moved by the final episode mainly because I'm like, oh my god, like yeah, wish fulfillment, like it'd be great if parents reacted in
Hmm.
a self-awareness way of like, I'm sorry that I didn't create an environment where you could be yourself with me or let me in on this major part of you. But then also like the grief of, as you say, like they're still closeted at the end, and we really don't know where this is going. And they're very afraid of being outed in a culture where they have reason to be afraid for being outed, like both internationally, like Ilya with, saying, I don't, I need a Canadian passport,
Yeah, Ilya is Russian,
is
which,
like, that danger is so
yeah,
real. But, so there's a lot there, but I do think like the wish fulfillment of straight women in particular watching is really different than probably what we were feeling watching the show.
yeah. I mean, in general, straight women overwhelmingly write uh, MLM romance and they overwhelmingly read MLM romance. And I think in part it is about masculinity that is not threatening, and like a safe version of cis men. I think that
Mm-hmm.
representation. I also think there's, straight women do not gravitate towards sapphic romance in the same way. I think some of that is probably internalized homophobia. I think some of
Mm-hmm.
that is fear that if they're into it, they might have to blow up their whole lives and they're not ready for that. Compet is real. But I think like a bigger part of it is that because straight women specifically do not know how to decenter men, from both the narrative or as like in terms of desirability, and so everything around,
Mm.
what they are, and all of us are conditioned to desire is cis men, and so them as love interests, as objects of desire, is much more accessible, to a lot of straight women. But then it's this version of men that lacks a lot of, like, they are divorced from the gender imbalance that exists in straight relationships that these women have to deal with on a daily basis. And so, yeah, I think that there's an appeal there that can sometimes border on like fetishization, um, that I find really uncomfortable. But at the same time, the other challenge that I have had as a queer person watching a lot of the discussion around it is the misreading and applying a straight lens to things that happen in the show and in the books in ways, like, I am obviously not a gay man, but I occupy a very weird spot in that I was a woman who dated men, and so I've dated in that space. I have dated in sapphic spaces, and then, um, as part of my transition when I was on T, I've also navigated dating and sex in like gay spaces on like Grinder and things like that. And the norms are wildly different in all of those communities around consent, around communication, around all of that. Um, I had to, especially as someone who had been a woman entering gay male spaces, I really, really struggled because I was projecting the norms of my own community onto the gay male community. And I had to actually take a step back and be like, wait, how is consent functioning in this space? When you take
Mm.
away the power dynamic of, a gender imbalance between men and women, um, obviously as a trans person there still is one, but in general in those spaces what they are doing is they're operating as, cruising culture, which has its own norms historically, which are also built into the show, which I would love to talk about. But I think
Yeah.
that, I realized, oh, I'm actually applying norms of this other community onto this one, and
Mm.
it's doing a disservice to the people who are in this space and completely misunderstanding like what is actually happening here. Like in sapphic spaces particularly, consent is much more, it's verbally negotiated often ahead of time. In gay male spaces it's often much more, your consent is kind of implied by you being in a certain space, whether it's a cruising spot or a gay bar, and someone will touch you. And if you don't want it to happen, you say no, right? And it's often respected, obviously. Let's let's just stop generally assuming people are looking for consent.
Right.
But it's a much more, it's
Right.
like physical first, and then if you say no, that they will back off, but there is an assumed level of consent just by kind of entering specific spaces, and that is kind of how it's being navigated. And so it doesn't mean the consent isn't there. It means that there are different norms and rules around it, and it's operating in a different way, and that's what you actually have to pay attention to. I would love to talk more about how gay cruising culture shows up, particularly in the first half of
Yeah,
episode
please.
one.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about that.
And I will also shout out, there's a queer intimacy coordinator who didn't work on Heated Rivalry. Their name is Amber Rose, and they have been doing wonderful breakdowns on their blog about like intimacy coordination as it applies to the show. And again, this is another thing I've been beefing with people on threads about, which is the idea, that Ilya is kind of an asshole, and that he is, particularly in like the shower scene, engaging in like non-consensual masturbation in public. And once we learn in the hotel room in the first episode when they hook up for the first time that Ilya has been with men before, so we know he knows already that he's attracted to men. If you go back to the beginning of that episode and you watch the first half again, what you will quickly realize is that Ilya has been cruising Shane for a year.
Right.
And that happens in the way he holds a gaze for too long and sees what Shane does. Does Shane hold it back, right? Shane does a lot more. He'll look and then drop and look and then drop. And that makes sense. He's much less sure than Ilya is. But Ilya will hold the gaze. Or in the scene, in the gym where Ilya is intentionally touching fingers with Shane as they exchange the water bottle, he's clocking that Shane is staring at his crotch and staring, at his mouth. He's noticing that.
Right.
He winks at him. Then he sets up a commercial so that they can see each other again, just the two of them. Tells him he's pretty, right? All of these things, they're subtle enough because, again, Ilya is coming from Russia. So if we think about male cruising culture, this had to be, how can we find each other in public without other people knowing that we're finding each other and like be safe? And so it's all deniable. Like there's enough deniability here, but Ilya has been picking up clues from Shane the whole first half of the episode. And by the time they get to the showers, Shane is staring at Ilya. And before Ilya touches himself, he raises his eyebrows at Shane because Shane is aroused. Shane is hard. Ilya does not start touching himself randomly.
Right.
And the minute Shane says not here, Ilya stops. And so you can see that consent is working on like multiple levels. And this is what I think is so brilliant about having a showrunner who's a gay man who can be like, this is how these things would have worked and do work. And you actually, the whole point, it's like flagging, right? The reason you flag is so other people in your community can find you, but the mainstream dominant community doesn't even know that it's happening. They're oblivious. This is the same thing. Ilya is cruising Shane for the entire first half of this episode up until their first hookup.
Right. Yes. And what's interesting is, you shared with me that not understanding that context around how consent operates differently in different communities has meant that some straight women in particular online, have been critical of that scene and others in ways where they're both like mapping male-female dynamics onto their relationship, but also kind of purposefully or not misunderstanding how consent is operating there.
Yes. The blowjob scene in the cottage is another example because Shane says no at first when he's on the phone with Hayden. But if you watch, Shane then moves up to the top of the couch to give Ilya access. He's non-verbally consenting. But if we're going to take like straight consent dynamics where sexual assault is so common, and there is a power dynamic differential between men and women, and so an enthusiastic verbal consent is kind of the benchmark for consent. And I've seen, even women being like, how could I even write these scenes in my straight romance that I write? And I'm like, but it's not straight romance. You have to understand that it's not straight romance. And the reason that these two men can have the interactions they have is because they're both men.
Yes.
And so if you write it with a male and female character, unless you've had them do explicit work that probably is going to be around kink and power exchange to get to a point where we know that maybe there's blanket consent for certain things built in, you can't just write that scene because the power dynamics do not work the same way. And I think that it's, I feel because look, I've been a straight person that was having sex with a cis man, a straight, you know, and or not straight. I'll just say I was in a straight marriage. I knew I was queer, but whatever. I was a
Sure.
woman having sex with men, and I would talk to straight women, and no one was happy with their sex lives. Like men are
Yeah.
overwhelmingly not very good in bed, and you're watching
Yes.
men who you are attracted to have hot sex. And I understand that you're
Yes.
like, how can I translate this to my own life? And I kind of want to be like, well, maybe you're gay, why don't you go try not sleeping with men altogether? But like, unfortunately, it's the toxicity of straight culture that is bringing you to a place where you really want this thing. And I empathize with that, but
Yeah.
this is not your culture, actually.
Yeah. And I think that's what's really challenging about seeing how many straight women are embracing this show and the books, because it's like, in a sense, like their wish fulfillment is they want the satisfaction, the vulnerability, like all of these things that they're kind of seeing in gay culture, that they want for their own lives, as you say. But that doesn't mean that they can co-opt a culture that they're not a part of. And I find that's where I have a problem with like straight people writing queer romance. It's like, if you're not in the community,
I
I
try to
don't know. Like,
have I try to have a little
it's
bit of
challenging.
I think about the fact that a lot of people who end up coming out as queer or trans were like really great allies beforehand. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
there's definitely people who use writing to explore parts of themselves that maybe they don't even realize exist. I think it's interesting. I've talked to authors who often, they were women writing MLM romance, and then it turns out they're trans guys. And they're like,
Right.
oh, actually, this is my
Yeah.
culture. Do you know what I mean? So
Right.
I
Yeah.
think I want to have
Yeah.
space for that too. But I think
Right.
and I think Rachel Reed respects and understands and like did enough work to respectfully, write this culture, and then having, Justin Tierney be the one to adapt it meant that it could be actually much more authentically portrayed on screen in a lot of those subtle ways. But I think that's the piece, yeah, that a lot of particularly straight women are missing, is that no, you don't have these things and you can't have these things because they're actually not for you.
Right. And like actually the harder work, but the work that maybe they should turn to if in fact they are not queer. Like if this is not sort of a wake up call for them, which I think for many people it probably is, but is to kind of take the elements of the culture that you're reacting to and try to like revisit the structure of the relationships that you're in
Yeah.
or the culture that you're in. And that's harder, right? Like that's in some ways like that's more pressure, especially if you're in like a straight relationship and there's just so much inborn, heterosexual power dynamics that people just take on without even realizing it.
Mhm.
And that's tougher to reinvent.
Yeah, it's dependent on the men that you're in relationships with being willing to do the work to kind of unpack all of the toxic masculinity and like the toxic romantic narratives, and that they've been taught. And most men are not going to want to do that work. Like, just they're not. Most people who are part of the like oppressive class do not want to do the work to unlearn the
Right.
thing that they benefit from. They don't.
Absolutely. Because they don't have to.
Yeah.
So why would they? Yeah. And, so in that way, it's like, it's kind of depressing.
I do. I
Maybe for
want straight women to have more fulfilling
like,
sex lives. And, my solution, I'm
me
always like
too.
joking and I'm like, do you women? I actually think people will be like, oh, I wish I was. And I'm like, you
Yes.
can just be. You
Yes.
can just
It,
be gay or
you
queer
can do it.
or.
Yeah. I mean, yes. And it is fascinating to, like, I'm gay, I'm married to a woman. My wife and I have a very like equitable relationship because it's our culture, it's what we work, it's a choice. And people, straight people in my life will constantly try to map like heterosexual roles onto both of us. Like, oh, are you the husband? Or like basically like you're the man because you do outdoor chores and she cooks more, therefore she's the wife. And it's like, no, the point is we're both women. Like that's the point. Like we're not a straight couple. Like we don't,
Well,
like that
Yeah.
doesn't work. Yeah.
I mean, I'm in a similar, I said, like, I'm in a weirdly straight passing relationship, but we're both trans. And so, my partner is a trans man, which means the example of masculinity that he has is not straight masculinity. He transitioned at 22. So he spent the first 2 decades of his life, um, presenting as a woman and navigating a world in response to that. And the result is that he's much more emotionally attuned and aware. And of course, this is like a blanket thing. Not every trans man is going to have that experience, but like in our case, a lot of the things that show up in our relationship that I think look aspirational are he was in lesbian community before coming out. It's like very like sapphic elements of our relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And in those moments, I always just feel sad. It's mostly women who will note, like, oh my God, your wife's so amazing that, like, she went out of her way to, like, very gay example. But when I met my wife, like, she made me a zine of music that she went and listened to that she knew I loved. And it's like, wow. And like a friend of mine was like, I can't even imagine my boyfriend doing that for me. And I'm like, well, you don't have to put up with this. Like, you can have something different. I mean, you could date a woman and you would get that probably pretty easily, but it's different. And it's like, it's not a criticism, but it always made me feel uncomfortable because it's like, I'm not going to apologize for the fact that I have chosen something that is more equitable, that is more fulfilling, and a lot of mutual care and respect. It just makes me feel sad for straight women who don't have it. I mean, there's a TikTok that I love that's a queer comedian who is like parroting like a girlfriend talking about how amazing her boyfriend is. And her bit is like, yeah, he's so amazing. Like last night I was thirsty and he went and he got me a glass of water. Like it was so incredible. It's like,
No, it's true. And
wow.
I think as I said before, a lot of when I was married, my kids were toddlers and you'd go like have play dates with other like moms met at the preschool and stuff. And most of what we had to talk about was kind of like how much we didn't like our husbands or the sex was bad or it's like it's kind of what straight women bond over, which is very very weird if you're in queer culture because it's like not a
Yeah.
cool thing to just like casually hate your partner in this way.
No.
But when I left, not a single one of those moms ever texted me again after I told them that I was getting divorced. And when I would see them at like birthday parties, they like wouldn't speak to me at all. The dads would always come
Oh
say hi.
God.
But I think what it is that like there's they're furious in ways that they don't understand because we had this thing that was accepted that was yes you marry men and they suck and that's kind of the life and then you get to bitch about them and I broke the social contract because I left. I was like actually I'm not doing this
I'm out.
anymore. I left
Yeah.
my unsatisfying relationship and you don't feel like for whatever reason you don't feel like you don't feel like that's an option for you. And there's I think that people get angry. It's kind of I think the same reason that a lot of people have so much like bigotry and hatred for queer people and trans people because it's like we are an example of people who are living a life that they will not allow themselves to live, that we have a level of
Right.
freedom breaking social norms and like pursuing that they like cannot allow themselves. And I think there's like a fury that comes with that. And that's how I felt when I left my straight marriage was that all of these straight women were like quietly furious that I had
Yeah.
opted not to just sit and suffer anymore.
Yeah, I do think that is a big part of it. And I do think, like, kind of returning to your earlier point, like, I think that's why a lot of straight women can't get into sapphic culture or won't read sapphic books in the same way because it's more, I think, an indictment of their choices, even though all of queer representation represents that same, like, break with the social contract and just an acknowledgement or proof that, like, you don't have to live this way. Like, we don't have to live this way. You can choose something else. And they don't like feeling that, but I do think the internalized homophobia too is probably why sapphic culture does not get the same. Like, I'll be curious to see, like, there's now a lot of rush to make copycat things to Heated Rivalry, including I think a Canadian show about a women's or non-binary softball team,
Yeah, which I'm
which
excited about. Does anyone want
me
to
too.
adapt my women's football book? It's also very gay.
I was gonna say, do you want to pitch? Can we pitch some storylines? Like, do you want to put out like any screenwriters out there,
Um,
any
I would
producers?
love it. We have a lot of, locker room romances. One of my favorite characters was the femme woman who brought her friend to tryouts and saw all the hot butch women and decided she would join the team to get a girlfriend. And she used to get down on point, like for the plays. She wore elbow length opera gloves so that she wouldn't get dirt under her nails. She's an icon.
This woman
The
is a queen.
Yeah, they one of the teams formed in a lesbian bar in Dallas, and the quarterback of that team went on to open a lesbian bar in Dallas that was a staple of the community for like almost 20 years. Um,
Whoa.
yeah, the mother of a future NFL player played in the league. She used to bring her son to practices because she didn't have a babysitter, and he grew up saying he wanted to be just like his mom, and then he played for the Buffalo Bills. Um,
Aw.
we have so many fun stories. The winningest pro
Okay,
football team of all time
incredible.
was in that league.
I
Yeah,
didn't know that. That's
there's a
incredible.
documentary. There's a book too. It's called "We Are the Troopers." The documentary is also streaming on Amazon Prime right now. But yeah, over 9 seasons, they like had some. They went like 61-4 or something around that. They didn't lose a game for 6 seasons.
Wow.
And even the Pro Football Hall of Fame recognizes them as the winningest pro football team of all time.
That's insane. Wow. I mean, this should be a show.
I agree.
Like, come on.
I
Like, come
agree.
on. I have no power, but I'm supporting of this. Like, I will. How do we get this going? I don't know. I'm going to think about it. But
Yeah, call me. Show creators, call
call,
me.
yeah, get in touch. Yeah, I mean that writes itself. I'm hearing so many. I'm hearing multiple seasons. I'm
Yeah,
hearing
multiple
multiple
teams.
arcs.
Yep, we had players that dated, and when they would get in arguments, they would put on their pads and helmets and go in the front yard and work it out that way. Yeah, the Dallas team played in the same stadium as the Cowboys. The
I
Detroit team's
mean,
jerseys were hand-me-downs from the Detroit Lions.
wow, bleak, but
Lots of
not
stuff
surprising.
happening. This league also had the pro league also had the first ever black coach in pro football because at the time the NFL would not hire black men to coach, and so um, there were black coaches. And then the first woman to ever coach in pro football was also in this league. She was a former player that moved on to coach. She was a black woman. Lots of fun little history.
This is incredible. This is incredible. All right, this show writes itself, and
It
there's
really does.
probably a lot of structural villains that can intervene with some plot lines, offer some conflict.
Oh yeah, they used to taunt each other. They played so dirty. They would send threats to the other locker rooms like ahead of time. And then you have all the media coverage that like was asking them how they protected their breasts, and like Hustler magazine came out to try to do a photo shoot. Yeah.
Oh my
There's
god,
lots of really great
this is incredible!
stuff.
Wow.
So somebody should make the show.
And with you,
I would
you are
consult.
essential. You are essential to the process. Let's be clear.
I'll consult.
Yes, yes, they need you.
My
They need
one
you.
thing would be that I don't want there to be one token butch. I want multiple butch like
Mm-hmm.
people on screen, and I want to see them as love interests and as desirable because they were. So that is my like big thing whenever I'm like, what is I this the one thing that like has to happen if someone adapts the show is I'm like, I don't just want a token butch. Like we need butch women on screen
Yeah,
in like loving relationships, having hot sex. Like, let's do it.
I'm ready. I'm ready to subscribe. I'm seated. I'm ready to watch. I mean, yeah, that would be incredible. And these are the kinds of stories that we need of queer sports stories. So, I mean, if you were, say, a producer, you could greenlight anything beyond this great series that someone's going to contact you about to consult on. Like, what are the trends or things that you want, as a jump, like with Heated Rivalry as a jumping off point? Like, where do you want storytelling about queer sports to go?
Well, I think I would love to see sapphic versions of Heated Rivalry, especially because those players don't have to be closeted, as we were kind of talking about, because a lot of the players are out. This is the other thing that's going to be the death of me. I love that a lot of the Heated Rivalry girlies are actually watching hockey great. Love that for you. Love that energy. Some of them are watching the women's game, but they're like posting screenshots of women's players being like, do you think they're in a secret, 8-year situationship? And I'm like, that's Captain Hillary Knight. Her girlfriend is Olympic speed skater Brittany Bowe. Like, those two are wives over there. Like, we don't
Right.
have to speculate and write
Right.
fan fiction about real players because we have these stories that are publicly available to us.
Yes.
That part I get a little bit uncomfortable with, where they are writing kind of fan fiction about real people. I saw
Yeah.
someone be like, Hillary Knight is the Scott Hunter of women's hockey. And I was like, no, she's not. Like, she's a veteran
What?
player and a team captain, and she's openly gay. That's
Right.
great, but she's not Scott Hunter.
Right.
So I think the beauty in the sapphic sports stories is that because we have so many out players in those sports, we don't have to have the closeted narrative, which is what is the driving conflict of Heated Rivalry, is whether it's the external conflicts of being from Russia or being a professional hockey player, the internal conflicts of Shane's internalized homophobia. The external conflicts, at least, don't exist in the same way in the women's stories. And so I will shout out Kate Cochran, who writes sapphic hockey books. She has
Wake Up, Nat and Darcy.
Wake Up, Nat and Darcy,
which
which
I've read.
takes place at the Winter Olympics.
That's right.
Yeah, and then Yours for the Season, which is a holiday themed one, and she just turned in the draft for her third book, which I know involves a hot goalie who is, I think, partially modeled on CJ Jackson from the PWHL. If you don't know who they are, you should Google them.
Yeah.
They're very hot. So I will shout out her hockey romance because I think it's great.
Yeah, I loved Wake Up with Nat and Darcy. I don't know if I'm getting the title right.
Wake
again.
Up, Nat and Darcy.
I struggle. Okay, thank you. I struggle with titles, with names, and with acronyms. Basically, I'm struggling a lot. But yeah, it was a great. I loved that book because my preference is not to read romances where the main conflict is being closeted. Yeah. Like, I've moved on from that. So my main wish is I just want people to, like, that is not the conflict. You're out, or, you're embodying your queerness, and then something else is the conflict. That's what I want to see. So, and that's what her books do, which I think is great.
The other book I think would be a great series is The Prospects by K.D. Hoffman. He wrote, it's a baseball book, minor league baseball players, and one of them is a trans guy who's playing in the minor leagues, and he is in a relationship with one of his teammates. And so you have also, I love the idea of, putting a trans athlete in pro sports in a way that just, he's, in the book, he's written as, the first, and he's breaking barriers, but he also just gets to play with the guys, and it's fine.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's also just a really well-written book. So that's another one that I think when we talk about what storytelling looks like in storytelling with queer. And I guess the other piece to bring us back to Heated Rivalry is Harrison Brown, who, again, we mentioned earlier, is in Heated Rivalry. He wrote a short film called Pink Light, and it stars CJ Jackson, the PWHL goalie we just mentioned, as a pre-transition version of Harrison's character. And it imagines, like, a different kind of version, or a different... it's kind of like, what if he could go tell his younger self kind of what the future looks like. And he is actually... It's done so well at film festivals and gotten so much buzz that there is talks about a feature-length version, and I think he is working on writing that now. And that is another story that I think is really valuable because it's not like after-school special sort of version of transness, and it's a kind of trans narrative that we don't really get to see. It kind of goes past the trans 101 sort of representation of that we're so used to seeing, and it's a much deeper story as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's so much, I think, more interesting stories than just being closeted at this point. I think having trans inclusion in a team and a sport, and just having them play, and then what happens with just interpersonal relationships, that's a great premise.
Yeah.
And I've read The Prospects, which is great.
Speaking of another good version of that, and this will be my last recommendation, I swear, but Victoria Zeller's one of the boys. It's technically YA, but doesn't
I haven't
read
read
that
that.
way to me. It's about a trans girl who was on the football team and then she transitions before her senior year and has to leave the team. She's the kicker. And her former teammates come and basically say, "We need you. We want you back on the team. You're one of us." And so she's a trans girl playing on a men's football team, boys football team in high school.
Oh,
um, and kind of what that experience is like. I thought it was great, and not a
oh, I'd
story that
love
we
to
get
read
to
that.
see a lot. So
I saw that Cleat Q is now going to be adapted.
it is, oh, so I've heard, by Megan and Sue.
Oh boy. So what do you think about that?
I hope the soccer in the adaptation is better than it was in the book. That is what I will say.
Yeah, a lot of great recommendations. And I know you have a link to others, which I will share. And, if people are not subscribed to your newsletter, I want to just, again, encourage everyone to hit subscribe right now and to become, like, to support not only your great work, but also, like, they get so many things for being a subscriber. And one of them is access to the Discord community, which I'm on and I learned so much from. And I just love like talking with people there. I've kind of been lurking, but I need to be more active. And I've been afraid to put it out there in the basketball chat. Like when you're a UConn fan, it's hard sometimes because people are like, UConn has a lot of like lore.
They do,
But
but I will say what I love about my Discord is even when people are actively rooting against each other's teams, like everyone is really happy for whoever's team has won. Like there's a few people that we
yes,
like tend to know their overwhelming fandom, and like when they win a big game, people will just be like, "Congrats, Katie," you
yes,
know, which
yes,
I appreciate.
yes. It's a very positive space. Like in a world where the internet is bleak and insane, it's a very positive space. And I'm happy to be a part of it. And my wife was on there before me, and she just like was never on Discord really before, but now she's like loves the Discord community. And, we chat so much about things that are popping off there. So I just really want to encourage people to check it out. Plus, you have a book club,
Yeah,
speaking of all these books. So that's really exciting and cool. And I've added all of the books from your book club to my to read list. So you're a great curator of
thank you.
books.
Thank you. Yeah, the book club is fun because I was kind of like, how can I incentivize people to pay money to join my newsletter? But also, as an author, you have friends that are authors and who write amazing books that you want more people to know about. And it's like, how
Right.
can I use my platform? And so the book club is great because we always have the author join us. And so it's a really, it's a small group of people, and you have direct access to the author to kind of ask whatever you want when we record it. So if you can't make it live, you can always watch it back. And that's been such a great space. I've had so much fun doing that.
Now, by way of closing, I do need you to share your account of the Sochi Olympics and a musical performance that Shane and Ilya might have seen
Yeah.
and witnessed, and what an iconic moment that was.
So anyone who has watched Heated Rivalry will know the iconic needle drop at the end of episode 4 in the club scene,
It
which is
is.
tattoos all the things she said, which for millennials, especially queer millennials, probably really hits in a specific place.
Absolutely.
We also know that in Heated Rivalry, the canon there is that they were both at the 2014 Olympics in Sochi. That was also the last Olympics that NHL players were able to play in until this one. But at the opening ceremony of the 2014 Games, Tattoo actually performed Not Gonna Get Us, which was also off that album,
A
just
wild
just
choice.
a few months after the anti-LGBTQ laws were passed. And so, in theory, if Shane and Ilya really were at the Sochi Games, they would have been walking out to a tattoo performance that then ended up in the show about them. And full circle, the remixed version by Harrison of All the Things She Said has been licensed by NBC and is running during promos for the Olympics this year.
Wow.
There's so much red
I
string. I am
mean,
the red string meme right now.
you are. You are. That's breaking my brain. That is crazy.
It
That
is.
is
Yeah.
crazy. The musical choices for the Olympics are mind blowing to me. And like I was telling you off air that I've been watching a lot of the figure skating because I'm really into that. And even just like I've taken myself on a deep dive of music that was not used at this Olympics, but I did watch someone skate to the Jaws theme last night and I was like, I don't know what's going
Okay,
on.
was it
But,
worse than Ilya Malinin skating to his own Jack Handy inspirational quotes?
I can't handle that. But there is like with that, I'm like, does it come back around and it becomes so ridiculous it's camp?
Uh,
Or,
I don't know. He also nicknamed himself the Quad God, which I didn't know, and that made the whole
well,
thing
and he has
worse.
merch and he was wearing his merch on the
Yeah,
way to the rink, the
I
Quad
don't know
God
if
tank.
you're 21 and you're
And
like
he,
that. It has to go to your head a little bit, I guess. Although speaking of beefing with people on Threads, someone today called me a boomer for not liking his music, his free skate music, and I was like, okay, I
oh
guess.
my God, just live. I mean, you kind of like that, you just have to, I would just accept that mantle, even though I don't agree with it,
Yeah, I was like, okay.
because the stakes are too high. I can't be forced to accept that behavior. I'm
No, the
sorry.
music is
All I have
bad.
to
The music
say
is
is
bad.
everyone in his life needs to prevent him from getting access to a podcast microphone.
Mm,
And I'm 10 toes down on that. Like that needs to make sure we need to make sure he does not get a podcast
yeah.
because I've seen the impulses, I've seen the choices, and it's a no for me. The worst musical selection I've ever seen. And this is where like if I was in charge of figure skating, I would make a rule. I would just like make this law. No one should be allowed to skate to the Schindler's List soundtrack ever again.
Again, someone's done that.
Frankie,
I don't
you
know
don't want to,
this.
oh God. They're starting with Katarina Witt the
Okay.
year the movie came out. She's skating to the
Oh,
Schindler's List soundtrack, as did another man. Years since then, people continually skate to the Schindler's List soundtrack and are basically like, this is a tribute. Or they're not acknowledging the context at all. Or, and I will post the photo, but I guess I'll have to post it with a trigger warning. There was a guy who skated to it with a costume that was like split down the middle, where half of it was SS
no,
officer and
no,
half of it was concentration camp
no,
pajamas.
no, no, that's a
And
no.
that happened. Yeah. So this is where I'm like, some of the choices, I don't know who thought that was a good idea. And, someone else was like skating to it with the Star of David on their
No,
costume and then they
again,
removed
no.
it. And it's like, guys, can we not? So it's like on that spectrum,
No,
like
as a Jew,
Ilya,
I'm saying no to that one.
oh, let's be very clear. This should never take place. And
No.
some of the skaters doing it are Jewish and are like, this is a tribute. This is me. And it's like, guys, there's other avenues. Let's moratorium. Please stop. That's where I'm
Yes.
at.
You know what? I think that that's an easy train to jump on with you.
I will send you some links after this that are gonna blow your mind, ruin your day, just make you stare into space. But unfortunately, I have to do it.
Okay, I look forward to it.
If I have to know this, then you need to know this.
Okay,
That's where we are. I'm sorry, but
I understand. I'll tell.
by way of closing, I guess that's the intervention I'm making in your
Okay.
life. Hopefully, more positive ones. I mean, I'm not here to bring the history that's going to just make you feel good. It's going to also make you feel insane.
That's
And
my
that's how I
entire,
feel.
like, I think that's my entire vibe. That's the vibe I always
Okay,
bring
great.
to the function. I'm
Okay,
autistic.
great.
Again,
Wonderful.
what rabbit hole have I not tripped and fallen down and then made it everyone
Thank you.
else's
I mean,
problem?
I'm not autistic, but I love that we both are, on a pretty regular basis Googling to see if the Lake Placid prison is still operational.
We're probably not the only two. If we both do it, other people are definitely also doing it.
Somebody needs to just make one of those sites. It's like, in case you're wondering, like constantly just like scraping data to make sure, like, yeah, it's still there, still doing it. Wow. I don't even know what to say. Thank you for being here. I love your newsletter. I'm going to be putting links to all of your Heated Rivalry coverage, every article, into the show notes, and I'll drop in the newsletter a lot of more resources on it, and also links to your newsletter with a strong endorsement for me to subscribe. I'm a proud subscriber. I love your work. I love supporting your work, And, do you want to plug anything? Give people information on how to follow you if people want to beef with you on
Yeah, if you
Threads.
want to come support my beefing, I always love, having some people. I can't figure out how Threads works. I cannot build a following on there to save my life. People just yell at me. I don't know. It's really unpleasant. Mostly I'm on Blue Sky and Instagram. Those are the two places that you can find me. They're the social media I have not yet deleted because I do unfortunately need some access to social media for my job.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. Thank you so much for being here, and I can't wait to talk to you again.
Yeah, same. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much to Frankie for joining me, and thank you for listening. For more information on the show and to find the resources mentioned in this episode, check the show notes. There you'll also find the link to my Patreon, where you can find even more research, info, and hot takes. As a member of my Patreon, you'll get a weekly newsletter and bi-weekly episodes delivered to you all for free. For $5 a month, you can get a bonus episode, a weekly newsletter of links and recommendations of things I'm loving in pop culture, chat with other listeners about all things pop culture and history, suggest topics for future episodes, and more. It also helps support my work. Landline is entirely reader and listener supported. Please tell a friend about the show and rate and review it wherever you listen to help me spread the word. You can follow me on Instagram at Mimi Mahoney, where my love language really is funny memes about Jessica Fletcher. Thanks for joining me, and I'll call again soon.